We're meeting up with our friend Bob Holmes, where we're going to discuss the line between inspiration, originality, and plagiarism, and even some examples of possible plagiarism.
Ed made me think about this shot because I made this photo. Ed was talking yesterday, any of you that were listening to him, about working in Kurdistan. I was there in 1968. It was the second time I'd been out of the country. I wasn't a photographer. I was a very enthusiastic amateur. I didn't really know much about what I was doing, but I was on a climbing expedition to Kurdistan.
Well, tell us about this image, and we were going to talk about Dorothea Lange too. Do you want me to show that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people have commented on this image, how it reminds them of Dorothea Lange's famous migrant mother photograph.
You guys can see that, right? So this is probably her most famous image.
And this sort of brought up in my mind this whole idea of plagiarism. The reality is, when I shot my photograph in 1968, I'd never heard of Dorothea Lange. I didn't know anything about the history of photography. It wasn't until after I'd shot it, someone showed me this image, and it was remarkably similar.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's different, but the mother has a gesture with her child, and there is a similarity. It's not obviously exactly the same, but
it's the same mood. And I always tell people they should immerse themselves in photography and absorb work, not copy it, but absorb it, and it affects the way you see. In this case, this wasn't a case of that, because I'd never come across. I didn't know anything about the FSA. I lived in England.
That's
I
funny.
didn't even know what the FSA was.
Let's define FSA. It's Farm Service Administration, right?
Farm Security Administration, I think it was, after the Great Depression.
Exactly.
So that's Dorothea Lange, a bunch of great photojournalistic photographers. Yeah, but it's something that was unknown to me. But it made me aware of this whole potential plagiarism thing, because people see this and my photograph, and I'm sure they think, I've just copied what Dorothea Lange did, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah,
it's purely coincidence. And if we can show the next shot, Mark.
Yep. Here we are.
Actually, I was going to show this.
Oh yeah.
I was in my local bookstore a few years ago and saw this.
I'm going to bring that up closer here so we can see that. Okay, there we are. Isn't that interesting?
I thought, God damn it, someone's used my photograph, and I don't have credit, and I don't remember getting a licensing fee for it. And now if you can pull mine up, Mark.
Yeah, I got it up there.
Let's see, this book was published 2009. That's 2009. This shot of mine that is up now is the same concept, almost identical to my photograph. And mine I shot in 1987 for the Los Angeles County Museum and Thames and Hudson. I was doing a book on the architecture of Shah Jahan. And this particular photograph had a lot of exposure. It's been on magazine covers, it's in the book, it's in the exhibit. And this was in the 20 years.
Hold that up again, Bob. So 20 years later, you get this image in the same exact, well, a little different framing, but very similar, and a similar gesture.
Yeah.
Do you think it was plagiarized, or do you think he just?
Sure. I can't believe that this photographer would copy anything.
Yeah.
He's too high a profile to risk doing that. I'd hope. You never know, but he could have seen mine and been, in the back of his mind, being influenced by it. And we all do the same thing. I'm equally guilty. I've seen things and I think, that's a pretty neat shot, and I go back to a place and you try to improve on it. I don't think this shot improved on it. But
I don't think so. I like yours better. I have a question.
I prefer mine too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not fair to level that at someone, because I'm sure it was absolutely innocent. And we all do it. I've taken photographs without realizing that I've seen a similar shot somewhere before. I
Yeah.
couldn't think of any examples because I hope I don't do it very often, but it's possible.
Well, let
One
me
of the,
ask you about this image. I mean, it's there's the Taj Mahal perfectly framed within the archway. But what interests me is how you got this gesture. Did you just wait? Were you just
yeah,
patient? How long did that take you until somebody came along and what is
well,
he
to start
doing? By the way, is he sweeping or
sweeping
why
the
is he
floor, yeah,
gesturing down?
he's sweeping the floor.
Okay, yeah,
Um, yeah, I'm always looking for, particularly for an iconic building or whatever, or an iconic scene, whether it's the Golden Gate Bridge or the Taj Mahal. I'm trying to find an interesting angle that you may not have seen before. And I hadn't seen this shot before in '87. I wanted the Taj framed by this. It's a Friday mosque at the side of the Taj. It's exactly the shot that I wanted, but it needed, as I often say, it needed punctuation. It
yes,
needed that extra element to make the photograph. And I stood here for some time. It just didn't happen in a few minutes.
right,
I took different variations. I got groups of people walking in, which didn't work. I wanted it to be symmetrical. And I saw this guy sweeping some way down, way before he got into the frame. And I just waited until he came up. And then I clicked a number of frames. And this was shot on film. This was pre-digital. I
right.
shot a number of frames as he came into the frame. And finally, I got the one. And I continued shooting after he was there. The
Yeah,
plagiarism thing is, particularly applies these days. It applies very much to landscape photography. And the big problem is Instagram.
yeah,
Everything is geotagged. And anything that looks interesting, anybody can find out exactly where to stand. And it's destroying, it's destroying areas. There's a place in, I think it's southern Utah, the Horseshoe Bend,
yes.
that 10 years ago you could go there, there'd be a handful of people. It wasn't unknown. Now you go, they've got strict parking rules. There's a fence. A few people have been killed taking selfies, going back. Yeah,
Unbelievable.
it's a nightmare.
Well, it's like your friend and
Yes.
mine, Ansel Adams, the moon over Half Dome, it's now known exactly when that moon is going to be in that position. And photographers flood there so they can take that exact photograph. Well, okay, but that's Ansel's photograph. That's not your
Horseshoe
photograph.
Falls is another example. Horsetail Falls.
Yes,
There's one weekend in February, or
that's right.
2 days in February, when the sun hits Horsetail Falls. There used to be no one there. I photographed it 20 years ago. There was no one.
And
No
now
one.
there's
Now
hundreds
there's
or thousands.
thousands of photographers shooting it. The world's changed,
It
and
has.
it's a pity. It's increasingly difficult to be original. An interesting experience I had, again, a long time ago in the '80s. I was photographing a book on New England, and I was photographing fall colours in New England. I found a spot. I always scout if I can, and I scouted a spot by a river that I thought would be fabulous at dawn the next day. So I go and get into place on this river, and I was doing a long lens shot with this incredible fall scene behind, and the light is just getting perfect, and someone walks into the frame with a tripod and a big camera
Oh, no.
about probably quarter of a mile away, and now I'd embrace that and use them. They could be the punctuation in the frame. At
Yeah.
the time, I was just so irritated by it and couldn't do it. And then another photographer comes, and the two of them start having this argument. The one that walked in the frame to start with starts yelling at the other photographer, so telling him to get out of the way, stop following him around. And it was really interesting. It was more interesting than the scene. And after the light had gone, I walk up and introduce myself, and the photographer apologized. Said, "Oh, I had no idea you were taking photographs." I said, "I'm using a wide lens. I hadn't seen you there. I'm so sorry." And he said, "I'm sorry about that altercation I had." He said, "That photographer's been following me around for years, copying everything I do." And so it
Unbelievable.
happens to me all the time. And the photographer was David Munch, the great landscape photographer. And yeah, it was just mind blowing. And he was, David was great. He was very, very, very nice and apologetic about getting into my frame. But he said he's just sick of people copying what he does. And now, of course, they can do it without having to follow him. They can just log on to Instagram and find out exactly where he was.
Bob, thanks for joining us again on Advancing Your Photography. Always a pleasure.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Mark. See you next week.
And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And remember to get out and capture your own images of life.